First up, news on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Israeli forces launched fresh attacks throughout the night, targeting the Hamas hideouts. The Israeli government says that it takes extraordinary measures to avoid hitting civilians. The Israeli military released the names of 4 more soldiers who died in combat in Gaza, bringing the total number of Israeli soldiers killed to 126. The Kerem Shalom border crossing point between Israel and Gaza opened for the first time for humanitarian aid trucks on Sunday. The crossing at the borders of Egypt, Israel and Gaza is one of the main transit points for goods in and out of Gaza. The border crossing point had been closed after the 7th October attacks by Hamas. Until its opening, aid was being delivered only through Gaza's Rafah crossing with Egypt, which Israel says could only accommodate the entry of 100 trucks per day. 2 Egyptian security sources have said that Israel and Hamas are open to a renewed ceasefire and hostage release, although disagreements remain on how it would be implemented. Egypt and Qatar, which had previously negotiated a week-long ceasefire and hostage release, insisted on expediting aid and the opening of the Kerem Shalom crossing before any negotiations could begin. An Israeli official said aid had been allowed to enter Gaza after Egyptian sources initially said that it had been held up. Hopes for peace were raised on Saturday when a source said Israel's spy chief had spoken on Friday with Qatar's Prime Minister. Meanwhile, there are reports that the United Nations Security Council could vote as early as Monday on a draft resolution to establish an aid monitoring mechanism in Gaza. The draft resolution called for facilitating the use of all land, sea and air routes heading to the entire Gaza Strip, including border crossings such as Kerem Shalom. The fate of the draft Security Council resolution hinges on the final negotiations among Israel, the US and the UAE. There are also reports that Israel and Hamas are both open to a renewed ceasefire and hostage release. As Israel's counter-offensive on the Hamas gained space, the Israeli forces uncovered the biggest Hamas tunnel near the Gaza border. A video footage on Sunday showed a large concrete and iron-girded tunnel designed to carry carloads of militant fighters from Gaza right up to the Israeli border. Another video showed a brother of Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader in Gaza, being driven in a car through the tunnel. Meanwhile, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant held talks in Tel Aviv with the visiting U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. The talks were focused on ending the high-intensity conflict and its transition to a more limited, focused conflict. And my colleague Trent Murray now joins us from Tel Aviv. Trent, after U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, now the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is visiting Israel. What might be on his agenda?
Oh, look, I think it'll be a fairly jam-packed agenda for the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, I should say. We know that touching down in Tel Aviv, he said he was here to express America's ironclad commitment to Israel, to get an update on the IDF operations in Gaza. But he also said he was going to work towards trying to understand how the Israelis can work better at minimising the number of civilians which are being killed within the Gaza Strip. And I think it's that last point which could prove most contentious. We know Washington is growing increasingly concerned about the way Israel is continuing to carry out this operation 73 days into the war, and they're looking for some metrics or milestones, in the words of the Pentagon, to try and work out what happens next. When will Israel move to a different phase of the war where civilians can try and be spared from the getting caught in the crosshairs, if you will. I think the other area we just have to keep an eye on as well is what's happening out there in the Red Sea. We know those Yemen-based Houthi rebels continue to fire on civilian ships, and we're hearing almost hour now after hour different shipping companies like BP and Evergreen saying that they're going to suspend their traffic through the Red Sea because they're concerned about the safety of those civilian ships. Some speculation the US could be on the verge of maybe announcing a military task force to try and safeguard that area. We understand several US ships are moving down into position as we speak. So we expect some more details on that in the next couple of hours when Lloyd Austin will speak to the press here in Tel Aviv.
Right. Also, Trent, the latest, what can you share about the opening of the Kerem Shalom border crossing point between Israel and Gaza?
Yeah, Kerem Shalom, a really significant crossing because before the war, that was the main entry point for goods going in and out of the Gaza Strip, but it has been closed since October 7th. The Israelis agreeing to open it once again, and we heard in the past 24 hours from the Egyptian Red Crescent that 79 trucks were able to get through on Sunday, delivering some much-needed aid. The reason this has happened, there's a little bit of background. Effectively, when that ceasefire was negotiated last month with Hamas, Israel agreed to deliver 200 trucks a day of aid, or to allow 200 trucks a day into Gaza, but they weren't able to keep that promise because all of the aid was coming through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, and officials said that that crossing was just never built to handle that amount of traffic. So there is hope that by opening up Kerem Shalom, that will significantly increase the amount of aid coming through. But what the Israelis are also saying is that the United States has agreed to a major upgrade and a funding upgrade for Rafah border crossing. They say long-term they're going to close Kerem Shalom and all the other crossings. They don't want any more goods or people transiting through the Israeli side. They say in the long term they want everything to come through the Egyptian side once that funding upgrade happens from the United States.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Trent, thank you. That was Trent Murray reporting from Tel Aviv. And one last piece of information coming your way, and this is also about West Asia. About 1,000 Israeli volunteers are helping Palestinian patients get medical aid at Israeli hospitals. Members of an Israeli volunteer organization called Road to Recovery are helping transport sick Palestinians from checkpoints in the West Bank to hospitals in Israel for medical treatment. All right, now take a look at some more stories making news around the world. Iranian-backed Houthi militants in Yemen have stepped up attacks on vessels in the Red Sea. The attacks targeting a route that allows east-west trade, especially of oil, to use the Suez Canal, have pushed some shipping companies to reroute vessels to avoid this area. European shares slipped on Monday after strong gains last week as automobile and luxury stocks fell, while comments from major central bank officials stamped down bets of early interest rate cuts. The pan-European Stoxx 600 edged 0.1% lower after logging a 5-week winning streak. On Monday, Kenya and the European Union moved closer to sealing an economic partnership agreement that will grant the East European nations exports duty-free status and unlimited access to the bloc. The deal was approved by the European Union Council last week. And in a dazzling display of festive spirit, Rome kicked out to full swing as the Christmas lights along Via del Corso, dedicated to the universal theme of peace. The decoration is composed of 300,000 points of light in total and form the word peace in various languages, including French, German, and Spanish. In other news, Iraqis began voting on Monday in the first provincial council elections in more than a decade amid calls for a boycott of the vote. About 6,000 candidates will be voting for 285 seats nationwide, this according to the Independent High Electoral Commission. The vote will take place in only 15 of the country's 18 provinces. Egyptian officials still have not announced who won last week's election, but incumbent President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is widely expected to win a third consecutive term. The elections took place at a time when the Arab world's most populous nation is in the midst of an economic crisis and also experiences the effects of the ongoing conflict between Hamas and Israel. El-Sisi is a former military general who has led Egypt for the past decade with an emphasis on security over democracy.
المشروعات القومية وحسأل بالإضافة
Serbia's President Alexander Vučić has claimed victory in a snap parliamentary election, saying that his party is heading for an absolute majority. Pollsters say the populist SNS party, led by Vučić, won 46.2% of the votes, while the opposition centre-left Serbia Against Violence Alliance is said to come second with 23.2%. The centre-left alliance accused the ruling party of election fraud and said that it would complain to the Electoral Commission after initial results. The European Union has set targets to dig up, recycle and refine lithium, cobalt and other metals it needs for its green transition. But these targets may be out of reach because of a lack of funding, high energy costs and local opposition. The bloc will likely need to find ways to trim demand, find substitute materials and forge partnerships that breaks China's stronghold on mineral supplies. The materials are essential for vehicle batteries, wind turbine magnets and other clean tech products which the EU wants to manufacture. In more news from Europe, the UK will introduce a carbon tax by 2027 for emission-intensive goods imported from countries with lower or no carbon price. The government said the carbon border levy would apply to carbon-intensive products such as aluminium, cement, iron and steel. The tax will reflect the carbon emitted in the production of the goods as well as the gap between the carbon price in the UK and that applied in the country of origin. Still to come on this edition of DD India Live. More than 300 people have been evacuated in what authorities expect to be Australia's worst ever flood. India's External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar holds talks with visiting Foreign Minister of Benin in New Delhi. India is Benin's largest trade partner and significant investor. The two sides are keen to scale up ties. And India's President Draupadi Murmu graces the 69th convocation of IIT Kharagpur in India's West Bengal.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts. We demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. More than 300 people have been evacuated in what authorities expect to be Australia's worst ever flood. Military helicopters have been dispatched to help people stranded in areas cut off by the floods. Thousands of people are experiencing power outage in northern part of Queensland state. Drone footage showed extensive flooding in Cairns as heavy rains cut off several tourist towns along the Great Barrier Reef. Weather officials forecast more rain in the next couple of days. At least 13 people have been killed in Argentina after a severe storm struck the coastal region. Authorities have warned residents that the storm, which had gusts of up to 93 miles per hour, making it comparable to a Category 1 hurricane, is further expected to bring heavy rainfall and intense winds to the capital city. Meanwhile, residents covered in layers of clothes in South Korea's capital, Seoul, witnessed unexpected dip in temperatures on Monday. Temperatures in Seoul reached a low of -12.2, just weeks after recorded 16.8 degrees Celsius on 8th December, the second highest temperature since 1968.
Just last week, I wore short-sleeved clothing, and because it was so warm, I either carried my coat or left it behind. But suddenly, within a day, it became extremely cold, and now I'm concerned about the earth.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Ukraine and the European Commission will soon assess Kyiv's progress on aligning its legislation with that of the European Union.
We have the decision of the European Council, for the sake of which we have worked throughout the year, a decision to open negotiations on membership. In the coming days, we will officially launch with the European Commission the process of assessing Ukrainian legislation for compliance with EU legislation, the screening process. We are also preparing for the work on the negotiation framework for Ukraine. We expect it in spring.
Meanwhile, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has dismissed the remarks made by US President Joe Biden that Russia would attack a NATO country if it won the war against Ukraine.
I think President Biden understands that. This is simply a figure of speech used in an attempt to justify a mistaken policy on Russian access. Russia has no reason or interest to fight the NATO countries. There is no geopolitical, economic, political, or military reason to go to war with NATO countries.
North Korea launched a second ballistic missile in less than 12 hours on Monday. The solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile has a potential to travel more than 15,000 kilometers. Pyongyang had condemned the U.S. for orchestrating what it called a preview of a nuclear war with the arrival of a nuclear-powered U.S. submarine in South Korea on Sunday. DD India's Jagrati Dave reports from Washington, D.C.
These latest indications of a launch by North Korea are expected to complicate further the attempts by the United States to denuclearize the peninsula. It suggests that North Korea is willing to double down on its threats rather than view the actions by the United States, Japan and South Korea, their cooperation, as a deterrence. And this ramping up of its missile test by Kim Jong-un is an example of that. There's added concern that North Korea could also supply weapons to Russia as part of its war with Ukraine in exchange for Russia's knowledge about nuclear technology. So these missile launches are worrying not only for the Korean Peninsula, but wider geopolitics. Now, all this comes as the United States, Japan and South Korea are about to launch a sharing system of missile data of launches by North Korea, and that's due to happen this month. And the sorts of things that they will be sharing are detecting and tracking incoming North Korean missiles. There'll be nuclear operation scenarios as part of their joint exercises. All of these which Pyongyang views as provocations, but which the United States, Japan and South Korea view as necessary parts of their attempts to denuclearize the peninsula and for the security of the trilateral agreement and their own individual nations against the threats and the challenges posed by North Korea.
South Korea's National Security Council called the launch a destabilizing act that ignored international warnings and multiple UN Security Council resolutions.
Despite our military's repeated warnings, North Korea continues to carry out threatening provocations. Once again, I strongly warn that North Korea is entirely responsible for any consequences from all subsequent situations.
Japan condemned the missile launch too, saying that it is capable of reaching anywhere in Japan as well as the United States.
Based on calculations of its flight trajectory, the ICBM-class ballistic missile launched this time has a range of more than 15,000 kilometers depending on the weight of the warhead, and in that case it can reach anywhere in the United States. We have strongly condemned North Korea and have made a solemn protest against its actions through diplomatic channels in Beijing.
China's foreign ministry spokesperson in turn said the Korean Peninsula issue was complex.
Dialogue and consultation are the fundamental ways to solve the peninsula issue. We hope that all parties concerned will face up to the crux of the Korean Peninsula issue, take practical actions to promote the process of political settlement of the peninsula issue and maintain peace and stability on the peninsula.
For his part, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan spoke to the issue and said that the U.S. condemns North Korea's missile tests as they are a violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. The long-awaited trial of Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai has begun amid a heavy police presence. The founder of the Apple daily newspaper stands accused of conspiring to collude with foreign forces under a national security legislation and taking part in a conspiracy to publish seditious materials under the city's colonial-era sedition law. Britain called for Hong Kong to release Jimmy Lai ahead of the trial on charges, including the United States. He faces up to life in prison if convicted on national security charges, which rights activists have called baseless. And DD India's Andrew Wood has more from Hong Kong. Take a listen.
The actions of Mr. Lai during his ownership of the newspaper is one part of the charges against him, namely that he committed sedition or conspired to commit sedition through the publication of the newspaper. Now, already in the first day of the trial, the defence have come back and said that actually there's a problem here, that the charges filed against Mr. Lai were filed a few days too late beyond the deadline. So that has to be sorted out by the court. But of course, if Mr. Lai's lawyers are successful, then certainly a large chunk of the charges against him would be dropped. The other part of the charges against him relate to endangering national security. Now, a few years ago, Beijing imposed a national security law, a very strict national security law, on Hong Kong after the protests of 2019. And this basically snuffed out an awful lot of dissent very, very quickly. Under these charges, Mr. Lai is charged with collusion with foreign powers, in particular America. He's alleged to have gone to speak to American politicians and asked them to put sanctions, allegedly, on Hong Kong politicians and Hong Kong officials who've been involved in the crackdown on freedoms, democratic freedoms in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, I'm Andrew Wood, reporting for DD India.
India's External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar held talks with visiting Foreign Minister of Benin in New Delhi. India is Benin's largest trade partner and significant investor. The two sides are keen to scale up their relations. Minister Jaishankar visited the Embassy of Kuwait in New Delhi to express condolences on the passing of the Emir of the State of Kuwait, Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmad Al Jaber Al Sabah. Minister Jaishankar said that the government and people of India will remember his notable contributions to the strengthening of ties between India and Kuwait. And India's Energy Minister Hardeep Singh Puri visited Kuwait and handed over Prime Minister Narendra Modi's and President Draupadi Murmu's personal letters of condolence to the new Emir on the demise of Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmad Al Jaber Al Sabah. Minister Puri said that India stands united in mourning with the leadership and people of Kuwait. In some more news from India, the Unified Payments Interface, an instant payment system developed in India, achieved a remarkable milestone, crossing an astonishing 7,000 crore, that's 70 billion transactions in October for the financial year 23-24. The trend continued in November, with much of the elevated spending being seen in shopping and e-commerce as well as travel transactions. The National Payments Corporation of India released the data. The surge in activity showcases the increasing reliance on UPI for everyday financial transaction. The Indian government's flagship program, Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra, is being undertaken across the country with the aim of attaining saturation of government schemes through ensuring that the benefits of these schemes reach all the targeted beneficiaries in a time-bound manner. The Yatra has reached the district of Bundi in the northern Indian state of Rajasthan. The Yatra was welcomed with tremendous enthusiasm and active participation from the local communities. The IEC vans at the center of the Viksit Bharat Sankalp Yatra have emerged as a dynamic tool as it continues to traverse various districts in the state. India's President Draupadi Murmu graced the 69th convocation of IIT Kharagpur in India's West Bengal state. Addressing the audience, President Murmu congratulated all the graduating students, wishing them well for the future and also admiring the largest greenfield campus of India, which is a blend of modern and traditional infrastructure.
IIT खड़गपुर भारत का सबसे बड़ा ग्रीनफील्ड कैंपस है। स्टेट ऑफ द आर्ट मॉडर्न इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर और गुरुकुल आधारित बुनियाद का विवेकशील मिश्रण अपने आप में सम्मोहित करने वाला है। मैं आज उपाधि प्राप्त करने वाले सभी 3,205 विद्यार्थियों को उनके उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए शुभाशीष देती हूँ।
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on the second leg of his visit to the Indian city of Varanasi today, unveiled a plaque to mark the inauguration of the newly built Swarved Mahamandir. The temple is dedicated to Sadguru Sadafal Deoji Maharaj, who is the founder of Vihangam Yoga, an Indian school of yoga and meditation. The Prime Minister paid tributes to the statue of Maharishi Sadafal Deo and also took a tour of the temple complex. The building has 115 lotus petal domes, and Swarved verses are carved on the inner walls of the temple. Spanning more than 300,000 square feet, the temple is the world's largest meditation center, capable of hosting 20,000 meditation practitioners. And Prime Minister Modi also laid the foundation stone and dedicated to the nation multiple development projects worth over $2 billion in Varanasi today. The projects included the inauguration of the new Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay Nagar New Bhavpur dedicated freight corridor project, among various others. He also flagged off the Varanasi-New Delhi Vande Bharat Express train, the Doordarshan Mau MEMU train, and a pair of long-haul goods train at the newly inaugurated dedicated freight corridor. Santa Claus delivered a Christmas message seated at his Arctic Circle chamber in Finland's Rovaniemi city, his official hometown. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website, ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.